Chapter 17. I stared at April in shock. "You heard all that?" I asked. "I needed the toilet," she replied. "But then I heard you talking, so I listened outside the door." I picked up my stake and gripped it tightly. "Be careful," I told her. "He is dangerous." "So, Dimmy's a vampire?" she asked. I nodded. "If that's true," she said, "then you must be a vampire hunter." My mouth fell open. How did she know about vampire hunters? "My grandma told me," April said, and held up her hand to show me her ring. "When she told me about witches, she also told me about vampires and hunters and fairies and a lot of other things too. So, if Dimmy really is a vampire and you're a hunter, then it must be true. I'm a witch." As she said the last word, she squirmed. "Yes," I replied. "Did you know the whole time?" she asked me. "Did you know witches were real?" "Not at first," I said, wanting to melt into the floor and vanish. "But then I found out." She cast her eyes down. "You should have told me." "I tried, but—" "It makes sense now," she interrupted, facing Dimmy. "The sunglasses, the way Etty didn't want to be near you, and you're so pale." She stepped towards him. "Stay back, April," I warned her. "Did your grandma tell you what vampires do to humans?" April's shoulders stiffened. "She said they drink human blood." "I have to take him to Traxis," I said. Dimmy came to stand next to me, his head down. "I can't fight you," he said, "so let's just go." "Dimmy," April said, "you're not going anywhere. You didn't do anything wrong." She threw me a determined look. "I can tell you what really happened yesterday." A part of me thought I should just ignore her and take Dimmy away. But what if she was right? Could Dimmy be innocent? "He can't be," I thought. "The vampire in the graveyard said Dimmy was going to be the strongest, cruelest vampire in the world." April went to stand in front of the door. "I'm not letting you take him until you've listened to me," she said firmly. "Fine," I replied. "What happened?" "Well," she said, "on the way to lunch I saw Bain Larkin walking downstairs. He was wearing Dimmy's sunglasses and I knew Dimmy wouldn't have given them to him, so I walked up to Bain to tell him to give them back. Like I expected, he just laughed at me and said he was going outside." "And then what?" I asked impatiently. "He walked out of the main doors and onto the field," she replied. "After that, Dimmy came downstairs. He was upset, so we went to an empty classroom to eat lunch together." "What about Bain?" I asked. "I didn't see him again," she said. "But I was with Dimmy the whole lunchtime. He couldn't have done anything to Bain. He was with me." I rubbed my forehead. What was I going to do? Bain had vanished. Mum had vanished. And if Dimmy wasn't responsible, who was? And how would I find them? "Fine," I said to Dimmy. "Maybe you didn't have anything to do with what happened to Bain, but you have to tell me about the new vampire clan in town." "I don't know anything about a clan," he said. I let out a frustrated groan. "There's a clan in town?" April asked, grimacing. "They're monsters," I said, thinking of what they'd done to Helen and Deirdre. "I need to know where they are." "I'm sorry," Dimmy muttered. "I don't know anything." A vein throbbed in my neck, threatening to burst. How could he know nothing? He was a vampire. My mouth opened. I wasn't sure whether I was going to moan in defeat or scream in anger. Before I made a sound, however, April spoke up. "Maybe it was the vampire clan," she said. "Maybe they're the ones who took Bane." Her words made me falter. The clan. It could have been them, I thought. But why would they steal a gem and then kidnap a boy from school? They wouldn't. They'd have no interest in a school kid, but the clan might have taken someone else, someone who was searching for them. Mum. The clan had taken Mum. How had I not seen it before? "What is it?" April asked. I was about to tell them about Mum's disappearance, but I stopped myself. I couldn't trust Dimmy with something like this, and April would worry if she found out. "I'm just thinking about Bane," I said. "We need to find him." Dimmy took off his sunglasses and squinted into the light. His jaw was tight, as if the brightness caused him pain. "I think I might be able to help you find Bane," he said in his soft voice. "How?" I asked sharply. "I have strong senses," he replied. "If we find where Bane disappeared, I might be able to track his scent." April smiled encouragingly. "We're going to find him," she said. I didn't say anything. There was no way Bane had been taken by the vampire clan. His disappearance had something to do with Dimmy. I was sure of it. "Etty?" April asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. "What do you think?" "It's worth a try." I gazed at Dimmy. "I'll be keeping my eye on you," I thought. Chapter 18. When the bell rang for break, the three of us made our way outside. The plan was to sneak onto the field and use Dimmy's vampire senses to track Bane. It was still raining, so I pulled the hood of my black leather jacket up over my head. April's yellow coat was fluffy and not very waterproof. With the hood up, she looked like a yellow teddy bear, but she swore it was the warmest thing in the world. Dimmy, on the other hand, didn't have a hood. His long black coat just had a high collar. He reminded me of the vampires I'd seen in films. He was like a miniature Dracula. As we sneaked past the teachers and onto the field, which was off limits when it rained, I worried that this was a very bad idea. We would be alone. Just April, me, and a blood-sucking vampire. When we were out of sight of any adults, Dimmy stopped and drew in a deep breath through his nose. "Well?" I asked, on edge. "Can you smell anything?" He shook his head. "Sorry," he replied. "I just need a moment to concentrate." April was on the lookout in case any teachers saw us. I was busy keeping an eye on Dimmy. Abruptly, he went completely still. He stepped forward, then again, and again. He was leading us away from school towards the trees at the edge of the field. I glanced back. April was following us. Finally, Dimmy stopped. I held my breath. We were on the other side of the field, the trees and bushes in front of us dark and swaying in the wind. Anything could have been hiding in there. He sniffed at the air and then pulled a disgusted face. "This is where Bane was taken," he said, "but his scent has completely disappeared." "Disappeared? What do you mean?" "I think the person who took him had a much stronger smell," he answered. "It's horrible." April caught up with us and sniffed the air as well. "I can't smell anything." "I can only smell it because I'm using my vampire senses," Dimmy told her. "Etty can probably smell it too, if she's a hunter." My cheeks burned hot. "I don't have my hunter senses yet," I said irritably. "Oh." Dimmy replied, bowing his head. There was a long silence. So, what's the smell? April asked. Cabbage, Dimmy said. The person who took Bane stank of cabbage. As soon as he said it, my heart skipped a beat. My mind flashed back to the graveyard and the ratty vampire. I remembered the rash on his skin and his dirty clothes, but most of all, I remembered his smell. He'd reeked of cabbage. Rafe had taken Bane. My heart dropped like a stone. An image of Mum about to stab Rafe through the heart swam in my mind. I'd stopped her. I'd let Rafe go. This is my fault. I know who took him, I said, silently cursing myself. And I know where to go. So, April said, that means Dimmy was telling the truth. He didn't do anything to Bane. That doesn't mean he's good, I thought. Maybe not all vampires are evil, April said. Dimmy's nothing like the vampires in films and stories. All they care about is blood and killing things. But that is all vampires care about, I replied. Well, not Dimmy, she said. According to him, I murmured irritably. April looked at Dimmy apologetically. Well, maybe there's stuff we don't know about real vampires. I mean, I always thought they burned in sunlight and didn't have a heartbeat. That's just superstitious rubbish, I told her. Vampires can go out in the sun, but it hurts their eyes. They're alive, but pale. They like graveyards, they don't have emotions, and they only care about blood. That sums them up pretty well. April folded her arms, clearly unimpressed. I knew what she was thinking, that I was being unkind, unfair. She thought I should have been nicer to Dimmy, but she didn't know vampires like I did. Mum had been preparing me to deal with them since I learned to walk. What I'd said was true. Vampires were emotionless, blood-sucking monsters. Dimmy was fiddling nervously with the sleeves of his coat. I wondered if he would say anything. Most of us are evil, he said. But I promise you, I'm not. Why? I asked, my voice stiff. What makes you so different? I'm not allowed to tell you, he replied. Is it something to do with you being born a vampire and not bitten? He froze. What? He said. How do you know that? No one is supposed to know that. Is that why you can eat normal food? I asked. Yes, he said, clearly shaken. Born vampires can choose whether they eat food or blood, but if they choose blood... He pulled a sour face. What happens? They turn evil. So, April said, that's why you're good. You've never drunk blood. He nodded. What about your dad? I asked. Is he a vampire? Does he drink blood? Yes, he's a born vampire too. And no, he doesn't drink blood. He eats food, like me. That can't be true, I cut in. If it was possible for vampires to be good, my mum would have told me. She said all vampires are evil and they all drink blood. Every single one. I'm not evil, and neither's my dad, Dimmy said. And I can prove it. He folded his arms. But I'll need some blood. Blood? I said. No way! Do you think we're mad? It's the only way to prove it, he said. I'm not going to hurt anyone, I promise. April tugged something off one of the bushes and brought it over to Dimmy. It was a thorn. What are you doing? I asked. April pricked her finger, and a bead of blood popped up. I rushed towards her, but she glared at me. "Wait," she said. Against all my instincts, I stopped. With every nerve on end, I watched as Dimmy moved his hand towards the blood on her finger. I thought he was going to touch it, but as the tip of his fingers got close, the bead of blood began to move away from him. It crawled backwards along April's finger. I leaned closer. I must be seeing things, I thought. He moved his hand again, and the bead moved further away, as if it was repelled by him. I don't believe it. Next, he held his hands cupped together. "Try to drop the blood into my palms," he said to April. Her face had gone pale. Without speaking, she lifted her finger so it was above Dimmy's hands, and she let the drop of blood fall. It should have landed in his palms, but at the last moment the crimson bead drifted sideways as if it had been caught by an imaginary wind. It missed his hand. The blood landed on the grass. I was stunned. April blinked, and again. "How?" she said. I don't know," Dimmy replied. "Ever since I can remember, blood hasn't been able to touch me, or even come near me. The only blood I can touch is my own." "Are all vampires like you?" April asked. "I don't think so," he said. "I think I'm the only one." So Mum was wrong. A vampire could live without blood. If that was true, then was Dimmy a good vampire? No, I thought. The witch's prophecy said he would be cruel and powerful. "You're one of a kind," April said to Dimmy. She reached out to take his hand. When their hands touched, she gasped. "Sorry," she said. "I'm still getting used to how cold you are." "That's okay," he replied. "It's nice to have someone touch me. People don't usually do that." "Well," she said, "I'm a witch and Etty's a vampire hunter, so you're not that different." Dimmy's cheeks turned pink. April took my hand, so the three of us were linked. I wanted to pull away. I wished I could see Dimmy's eyes behind his sunglasses. What was he thinking? What was he planning? Finally, April released our hands. "Are you going to tell us then?" she asked me. "What?" "Who took Bane?" she said. "And where do we have to go?" "His name's Rafe," I told her. "He's a vampire, and we have to go to the place vampires love most." "Where?" they asked. "The graveyard."